Welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast, helping you ace your exams at school and university through the psychology of high performance and the science of studying smarter, not harder. It's my pleasure to introduce your host, the Cambridge-trained memory psychologist and exam success coach, William Wadsworth.
In last week's episode, we heard from habit change coach Chris Loper all about the science of behaviour change and how to get new habits to stick in your life. Today, it's my turn in the hot seat, and Chris is going to be coaching me on a habit change. The habit I wanted to focus on was meditation. The first part of this conversation you're about to hear was recorded in spring 2021, when I was just starting to build up a meditation habit, but wasn't yet being consistent. I knew it was potentially really important to develop this habit for so many reasons. If you want to dive into those reasons in more detail, if you Google the words benefits of meditation for students, you can read my article on the benefits of meditation for students, which should pop up as, at the moment, the first result for that search. The list of benefits of meditation for students is a pretty impressive list, spanning focus, concentration, mental, emotional health, even physical health. But this episode isn't just about meditation. Really, the point of it is that whatever habit you're trying to build, whatever habits you're trying to build up or potentially get rid of, I encourage you to listen in to the approach Chris takes with me, and you can apply exactly the same principles to your own life, whatever habit you're trying to change. So I started the conversation by telling Chris what my intention was, building up this meditation habit. And the first thing he asked me was, well, why? Why does that matter?
So lots of different reasons people get into that. Why are you trying to get into that?
Perhaps the single biggest reason is it's probably about practicing what I preach. and I find it's something I'm recommending quite a lot when people are talking to, particularly when people are asking me questions about focus and concentration. That is one of my go-to recommendations. And it certainly seems there's a lot of evidence for the benefits of mindfulness, meditation for those kinds of, for helping with those sorts of problems. So there's an element of wanting to lead by example and do what I'm teaching to others. For myself, I do like the idea of having more control over my thoughts and where my thinking's going through the day. I have some very productive days where things are ticking along very nicely. I have some other days where maybe my thinking is slightly more distracted. And the latter kind of day rarely happened I found that was happening less often when I've sort of done meditation practice in the morning.
And have you read books about it or, dug into, articles or research about what the benefits are, how to do it?
I've certainly read into the literature a little bit. I haven't gone as far as reading a whole book on the subject, but I've dug into the literature. I wrote a blog post on it for my own blog a little while ago about the benefits of meditation for students, which is quite a good prompt to dig into the research on the benefits. The focus element was certainly one thing, but I was also reading about benefits for stress levels, anxiety. My mental health is normally pretty good, but that was another benefit I came across quite a few places. Even impacts on physical health. There seems to be some evidence for that as well.
And that maybe we're not sure if that's a mind-body connection thing or if that's like the benefits actually just come from sitting and breathing and doing nothing else for some amount of time because we don't do that enough.
Sure. Yeah. Causal links perhaps to be ironed out, but there certainly seems to be some initial suggestion that it might be helpful for things like long-term cardiovascular health, that sort of thing.
Okay. So you've had the experience of I meditated in the morning and my day went a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in that sense, it's kind of like exercising in the morning.
Absolutely.
Like exercise in the morning, your brain's going to be a little better for the day. You're going to be a little more energized and focused. Yeah. So there's a mild to moderate immediate benefit that you probably won't experience most days or every day. You might experience it some days or even most days, but not all the time. Like, I could meditate and exercise in the morning and then still have a terrible day.
Yeah.
Like that could still happen.
Yeah.
In my experience, the benefits accrue over the long haul in a way that's hard to notice day to day. Sort of like diet and exercise, or even something like brushing your teeth and flossing. Because I kind of treat it as a standard daily health practice and mental health practice where I'm committed to the process and I'm patient about the results.
That's a nice way to think about it. Yeah.
My experience was that, like, yes, if I meditated in the morning, my day was probably going to go slightly better. But like a year into meditating, I had like the experience of showing up to the airport and the TSA line was like 2 hours long and I wasn't sure if I was going to make my flight. And I was standing in this line and I have a bad foot. So my foot is just killing me. And I'm like sitting down every 30 seconds to take my shoe off. And then like the line moves. So I like shuffle my stuff forward a little bit and sit down. And so it was just kind of this perfect place to be incredibly impatient and frustrated. And I was like watching everyone else around me just lose their minds because they had surpassed the amount of time you can be entertained by a cell phone. And I'm just sitting there like, I'm actually kind of okay right now.
Yeah.
I'm actually feeling kind of zen about this. I've come a long way. A year ago, I'd be losing my shit. And so that was kind of that, like, your aunt hasn't seen you in 2 years when you're a kid and they're like, oh my God, look how much you've grown. Like, but you don't notice it day to day.
Yeah.
So that was my kind of moment when I was like, oh, wow, I've actually grown a lot because of meditation.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I don't feel I've ever got to a point of consistency where I've started to feel those benefits accruing through the long term. Yeah. I think I've yet to get over that hump. And I'm sure that once you do, it's then much easier to keep it going as a lifelong habit.
That certainly reinforced it for me in terms of benefits. And also by that point, I was doing it every day, same time every day. And it was very, very much an ingrained ritual and part of my identity. Okay, so when you think about sitting down to meditate, what are the mechanics of, where are you doing that?
Usually be in the room where I'm talking to you from now. Which is
in the same position, or is there a dedicated like chair or space?
I was doing a mixture of things in the past. No kind of dedicated meditation chair, so to speak. It's not to say there couldn't be.
So in the corner of my office, I have a firm but comfortable chair that is used for only two things: reading and meditating.
Yeah.
And so if I go sit down in that chair in the morning, it means I'm meditating. I go sit down in that chair at night, it means I'm reading.
Yeah, nice. What time do you do meditation immediately on waking up, or is there something that happens in between waking up and meditating for you?
So my morning routine looks like I wake up and I go outside and do a bunch of like physical motion, just moving my joints around. There's just kind of a routine I have for that. And the cold helps wake me up, and the bright light of the morning helps me wake me up, and the movement. And then I come inside and I do a few key stretches that are kind of essential for my physical therapy routines. And while I'm going through that, I'm doing a loving kindness meditation in my head, which is a different kind of meditation that I've layered in. And then I'm either working out or going upstairs to do my meditation. Usually it's working out. The typical routine is I work out and then I drink a cup of coffee while consuming some wisdom for the day, usually from optimize.me, this book summary service that I have a membership to. So some kind of self-development material, for like 10 minutes while I drink a cup of coffee, maybe put a few pieces into the jigsaw puzzle. Then by this point, I'm alert. My brain has been given a little bit of, healthy ideas, and I'm very much ready to go sit down and meditate. And then from there, I go into writing. I go deep work mode, do a half hour or more of writing, and then it's time for breakfast. That's the standard rhythm. And after breakfast, I finally take my phone out of airplane mode. So I went into airplane mode the night before, and then after breakfast, I'm allowed to check email. Yeah. So I'm not doing work and I'm not doing external stimulation before meditating.
That's nice. Sidebar, but one of the best life routine changes I ever made was stopping checking email first thing in the morning and delaying it. I often don't do it until lunchtime. Leave it the entire morning, and that's just golden. I love it. It's lovely. I love it.
Yeah. So having a space that is consistent helps ingrain the habit, because it works as a kind of a cue. You go to that space, and therefore it's time to meditate. And doing it consistently, not necessarily at the exact same clock hour of the morning, but probably immediately after and immediately before, some other portion of what you already do.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So my thoughts on that are get myself a meditation chair for the room. I unfortunately can't spare a whole room for reading and meditation, but I can definitely spare a chair for that room.
Just the lower corner, isn't it?
In terms of routine, one of the things I've been thinking about when I was most consistent with meditation was when I was accountable to someone else in the form of, I mentioned that my friend who was running the morning meditation sessions. That meant I was more consistent in showing up. But unfortunately, it wasn't every day. It was only Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So it never became like a daily ritual. There were always some days where it happened, some days where it didn't. So it was inconsistent. That was part of the problem. And the other part of the problem was I was often waking up and then pretty much bleary-eyed rolling straight into doing meditation before my brain had had any chance to really kind of come to terms with being awake.
It's kind of a nap. You're just kind of sleepy and...
Yeah. So I was kind of in that, I tend not to go from, I know some people just roll out of bed and they're like, boom, straight 60 miles an hour instantly.
Yeah.
Not me either. Like it takes, like there's a delay where I was sort of slightly coming to terms with the fact that I'm no longer asleep.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was noodling on while we were chatting just now was the last, recent weeks, I've started to get into a habit where I wake up. The first thing I'll do is read a little like you were saying, take on some wisdom for the morning, and I'm finding that's working quite nicely.
Oh, sure.
So I feel meditation would slip in quite nicely just after that bout of reading, potentially before going and brewing some coffee and getting down to work. That feels like a nice flow for the morning. I'm not actually a morning workout person. I tend to work out a bit later in the day, around sort of the middle of the day, early afternoon. I find that tends to work better for me, particularly through the British winter where it's freezing cold first thing in the morning. The last thing I want to do is go outside. But by lunchtime, it's kind of I can kind of come to terms with that, and I will do. So that tends to be my pattern. Yeah, so I feel like that flow to the morning might work quite well.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So if you got a rhythm where you get up and you read a little, and then that can just go straight into meditating for a little while. So when you think about sitting down to meditate, how long do you think, what are you doing in terms of time?
It's a great question. And again, just sort of referring back to the the live led meditations I was doing recently. I think one of the downsides of that was that it was often quite long. It was supposed to be 15, 20 minutes. And she's fantastic. I'd highly recommend it. But there were times where we might go like more like half an hour, even beyond like 35 minutes, 40 minutes almost. And I'm thinking, blimey, that's now quite a chunk out of my morning routine. 15 minutes is like, 10, 15 minutes. Anyone can spare 10, 15 minutes at most points during the day, unless you're wildly busy. But sparing like 30, 40 minutes, now that's sounding like more of an investment of time. And again, I think that was part of the drive in sort of falling off the horse at the time. So I think 30, 40 minutes is way too much for me, at least at the moment. I know something like, the kind of the beginner programs in Headspace and Calm and apps like that will often start with 5 minutes a day, maybe even less. I'm feeling like I could take 5 to 10 minutes, that kind of amount of time, at least to start with, and then potentially as I get more proficient in the practice, if I need to expand it from that, or if it makes sense to expand it from that, I could do. But I think to start with, 5-10 minutes feels about right.
Yeah. So I'm going to recommend that you make it even smaller.
Okay.
Like I'm going to say my recommendation would be 3 minutes.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you're doing 3 minutes a day for the rest of your life. You get to grow it.
Yeah.
But you got to start with consistency.
Yeah.
If you raise it too high, it's so much easier to experience resistance and then believe you don't have time. And also, it's really hard and you're a beginner. So when you're first starting out, like a 20-minute meditation is like going for a 10-mile run. When you haven't been running, I was like, well, that's really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
Or you'll end up kind of not running and sort of walking it because you don't know, you don't have the experience.
Yeah.
So I think 3 minutes is a really good place to start because it's small enough where you like no reasonable person would say like, no, I don't have time.
Sure.
You can't really believe that excuse if your brain says that.
Yeah.
And it's long enough to actually get to experience it, and feel like it wasn't nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people say start with 1 minute, and I feel like, that could be like 5 breaths, and you don't necessarily get any chance to practice the refocusing game. I initially tried to start meditating by doing like 20 minutes a day, because like the research studies usually centered around like taking beginners and having them do 20 minutes a day. And, I would do it for like a day or two. And then, one day I'd be like, I don't feel like it, or I'm too busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the habit would disappear. So it was just too much.
Yeah.
And there was this great book called Mini Habits, I think, or Tiny Habits. I think those are both the names of books. But the concept of a mini habit is starting crazy small, focusing on consistency, and then building up gradually as it becomes automatic.
Micro habits I've heard people talking about as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same idea. Yeah, I like that. And I've used a very similar principle successfully with my sort of exercise routine. That's something that I think I have now got cracked after several years in years gone by of being definitely less consistent than I wanted to with my exercise routine. And I use the same principle with that. Every day I'll go out, even if it's just a couple of kilometers, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And that means then you don't break the streak, don't break the chain, stay consistent. Exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of chains,
yes.
My successful implementation of a meditation habit was the combination of the calendar chain tool and the mini habits idea, both of which I thought were stupid. I was like, well, there's no point in doing 3 minutes a day. That's not enough. That's dumb. And the calendar chain thing just sounded cheesy and stupid. And I was like, that's not going to work for me. And I believed that for a while. And I had failed at starting a meditation habit enough times that, something clicked in my brain, maybe hearing these ideas one more time in early September 2015. And I was like, you know what, screw it. What's the worst thing that happens if I try this technique out? And so on, the 4th of September, I printed out a calendar for 3 months and said, okay, 3 minutes a day, that's my minimum. And I left the calendar on my desk so I would see it every day. I started putting X's in boxes and it just blew my mind. Like I didn't miss a day for months. In the first year, I think I missed like 7 days total. Yeah. So I would highly recommend that.
Yeah. I've never actually done a daily calendar, or rather I started doing a daily calendar once upon a time for the exercise thing and I fell off. But I've more recently very successfully used a daily calendar to establish habits in the business side of what I do. So running Exam Study Expert, I have gold star charts on the wall. I used to do weekly stars for getting podcast episodes out and writing emails to the email list. And I don't actually have those charts up anymore just because it's become so much a part of the default mode, what happens every single week, that I don't need those charts to keep track of the things that need to happen, that they just happen. So I know that works for me. I think that's a great idea. Use the calendar chain tool. I wanted to ask you about weekends versus weekdays, because just looking at your calendar, you had a fantastic array of X's spanning every single day of the month, weekends not included. And one of my thoughts is that weekends feel a bit different to weekdays because the morning routine tends to be a bit different. And actually, for all I've been saying, I'm quite consistent with exercise now. I am during the weekdays, but weekends, something else might happen. And often there will be some form of exercise, but it might be more recreational, and it might involve, my wife and I going for a walk, or something more of that nature, or for a hike, something more of that nature. So what are your thoughts with regards to the meditation habit and the importance or otherwise of weekends?
So there's this idea out there that it would be easier to do it if you had the opportunity to take days off. It would be easier to do it like every other day, or to be able to take weekends off. And that turns out to be wrong. It is easiest if it is 100% consistent. If there are never days off for a habit like this. With exercise and work stuff, totally makes sense to take days off. Your body needs to rest, your mind needs to rest. But something like this, I would not take weekends off. I would not take vacations off. And, it's like my morning routine on the weekend is different because my partner's not getting up early to go to work and leaving the house. But I just schedule myself to get up a little earlier than she does to do my meditation. Or, if I'm on vacation, same thing. It's like, my partner knows that I'm going to go meditate. Or if I'm like on a camping trip with friends, it's like they know that in the morning I'm going to go meditate. And they're going to get out of the tent and see me sitting on a log. And they're like, oh yeah, Chris is doing his thing.
That's awesome. I mean, the thought of me doing that from where I am now, that seems like a very brave thing to do. But I can also see how if I did start to do that, I think one of the first things you said was in relation to meditation was you've kind of adopted the identity of being a meditator. You've adopted it as part of your identity. And I can see how that level of sort of putting your head above the parapet, almost quite publicly declaring this is what I do every morning in front of other people, is a massive lever in shifting your sense of self-identity when it comes to I am the sort of person that meditates every single morning.
And you can gradually add time to the habit. But I would say, get 3 months of being consistent under your belt before adding a minute. Gradually over time, you can add a minute, or at some point I added the loving kindness meditation because that was something I wanted to incorporate. And my end goal was to reach 20 minutes a day because that's how I originally started out trying to do. And I finally got there this past September. And so now I'm just settled into 20 minutes a day, And when if I'd gone from 3 minutes to 20 minutes, it'd be like, holy cow, that's so much. But what happened in last September was I went from 19 minutes to 20 minutes and I didn't notice the difference. If it feels like it's going to be too much, too hard, you're not ready. Should be like, yeah, this is easy. I do this every day. It's no problem. 1 more minute, totally fine. That's when you're ready. And then one mechanical thing is like, I use a timer on my phone to do it. And some phone timers have just a god awful sound. And that is not how you want to come out of your nice meditation. You don't want to, you're not, if you hear, rah, 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 like that's not reinforcing the habit. Some nice little soft, peaceful tone that's like, oh, meditation is over. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you about tools actually. So my thought was, I feel like I still need a bit of hand holding. Like if you held a gun to my head and said, okay, William, sit down and meditate for a few minutes. Like I think I know enough to know what I'm doing, but I still feel like at the stage I'm at now, a little bit of guidance is still something I want. So my thought was to go back to Headspace and use that to guide me probably go right back to their complete beginner initiation program, which lasts, I can't remember exactly, a couple of weeks, and work through that as my first steps.
And that's a good idea. I definitely have used guided meditations, and they can be very helpful, especially if I feel like very scattered, having a very, overactive brain, very stressed out brain day. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to start with this guided meditation that's going to tell me, it's going to help me stay on track and get my mind right before.
Yeah. And one of the things I like about sort of my experience with, the Headspace, at least the beginner program, I'm not sure about the other programs in so much detail, but they are very short. Like you were saying, it's just sort of, 3 minutes sort of length. Again, one of the problems I was having with the kind of longer guided meditations, I was really struggling for a lot of the time to even vaguely engage with what was being said. The overall experience was very nice, but I was conscious a lot of the time that I know there's no such thing as meditating badly, like it's all good. But that was sort of my perception. I was scoring very low on any kind of sort of focus. The mind wandering was extensive and prevalent throughout almost the entire time.
Yeah, that's like I said about trying to go for a 10-mile run when you haven't been exercising in a long time. And you just mentioned a very common pitfall for meditators is the I'm not good at it. I can't get my mind to stop wandering. I'm like, well, actually, the Dalai Lama can't get his mind to stop wandering either. Turns out that's not possible. The goal, the exercise is meditation is the exercise of catching yourself wandering off and bringing your attention back to an object of focus, like your breath. And really, the purpose of it is the struggle. If it wasn't hard, it wouldn't be doing you any good. It's like lifting weights. You lift the weight up, that's you bringing the focus. You let the weight fall, you've lost focus. Bring it back, So it's like Dan Harris, who wrote 10% Happier, his book about meditation. He says, it's like bicep curls for your prefrontal cortex. So when you have your worst meditation ever, because your mind's just all over the place, it's like, no, it's fine. That's what your brain needed to do today. It's okay.
This is sounding good. Anything else I should think about in terms of either things I could do to help or potential pitfalls we can preempt?
I think, I think you're well set up. So making a dedicated space, print out a calendar chain, I would write onto the calendar chain what the minimum is for the day. You might also write why you're meditating. So on a day you don't feel like it, you look at that, you can remind yourself the reasons why. There is a practice called failure prediction. This is something Kelly McGonigal recommends from her book, like The Willpower Instinct, where, if you're trying to do something that requires willpower, like starting a new habit, imagine the first time you fail. Imagine the day you don't meditate. Predict why that happened. And if you can predict that accurately, you can prevent it. And if you don't predict it accurately, that's fine. When it happens, it's a learning experience. And you go, oh, I didn't see that coming. That kept me from meditating. What can I do better next time?
I'm trying to ask that question to myself right now. I feel like possibly the single biggest thing is waking up after particularly, bad night's sleep, late night sleep. That old adage that you win the day the night before by making sure you get to bed at a reasonable time and you've had a bit of time to wind down and you're not staring at your phone in bed and too late in the evening and all that stuff. Make sure you get a quality night's sleep so you can wake up the next morning and win your morning.
So on the morning that you're very tired and you really don't feel like it, what are you going to do?
You do it anyway. It's only 3 minutes.
Yeah. And remind, probably a good day to reinforce with reasons why. And if you're feeling crazy tired, and if you're a coffee drinker, couldn't hurt to have a sip of coffee beforehand. And, the mindset I have for days like that is like, the worse my day is, the more I need it. So If I'm feeling really bad, I need to be more committed to my fundamentals.
I like that. Yeah. I know I've drawn the parallels to exercise a couple of times, but just, yeah, that's been a big revelation for me relatively recently. Like, even at my busiest months, in years gone by, the exercise would have been the first thing that would have gone to, I thought, free up some time. But I've realized more recently that actually staying consistent with that is just the best answer to make sure energy levels stay high when I most need them.
Yeah, there's a joke, possibly a real story. Someone asked a meditation teacher, so how much should people meditate? And he's like, an hour a day, because he's a very serious monk. He's very devoted to it. And he said, people should meditate for an hour a day. They go, well, wait, but what if you're like really busy and you don't have time for that? And he's like, 2 hours a day.
Excellent. Yeah.
Because you need it more.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great.
Okay. Yeah. So I look forward to hearing how that goes.
I'll keep you posted. So I'll print out my calendar chain today. I will make sure I've got the Headspace app nice and accessible on my phone. I will make sure I'm getting a decent night's sleep and wake up the next morning raring to go, so that after a little read, I'll get my meditation chair set up, so that after a little read, I can sit down and get into 3 minutes, just 3 minutes of meditation. Yeah, I look forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. So, how did things go? Did I stick to my intentions? I caught up with Chris a few weeks later for a debrief. Here we are, part 2, catching up on how the meditation habit is going. Chris, what questions have you got for me?
Well, of course, my first question is, did you do it at all?
I did, yes.
Yeah, how'd that go?
It went well, actually, yeah. So we're kind of day 11 now, not continuously. There've been a couple of small gaps, 3 days in the past 2 weeks in which I didn't do it, all at weekends. Maybe we can talk about that in a second. But overall, particularly during the week, habit really seems to be starting to build. I'm just looking up at my wall chart, my calendar on the wall as we speak, and I can see the crossed off days, and I can see the streak building up. I haven't missed a single weekday since we started, so yeah, no, it feels like it's been going well. Promising early signs. That's
great. One, just congratulations. You went from not meditating more or less at all to meditating almost every single weekday, and that's huge.
Well, all credit to you as well.
Well, all I did was set you up for that. How's the space that you set up to do it?
Yeah, so I record in this room. Over in the corner there, I've got a little chair, which I pull out into the center of the room when it's meditation time in the morning. And that gives me a view out through the window, out over the garden, which sort of quite a nice setup. So it's the same space as I work in.
Yeah. I like the pulling it out to get a view of nature and enjoy. You get a good feeling before you do it. Because it's calming to go look at nature, and it's sort of like a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down, which is a strategy I like.
Definitely.
Good for you. All right. Is doing it on the weekend something you actually want to do? And it's okay if the answer is no.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's something I remember we talked about first time round. And we sort of, I think my initial instinct was not to. And I think we talked about it, and maybe there's a suggestion that doing it every single day was, even more powerful and would even more strongly kind of build that identity as I am someone that meditates, which is quite interesting. I think it might be something I might want to work towards. I don't feel myself feeling at the moment desperate to. I don't feel like I'm beating myself up. Oh, why am I not doing it weekends? Like, I feel quite good about getting the weekday habit going. Maybe weekends. Maybe that's something I look at later down the line. What do you think?
I think that's fine. If that's you want to do weekday meditation and that's it, that's great. Do that. If you decide to meditate on a weekend day, that's just bonus.
Yeah.
right? That's just, I went above and beyond, did extra. And then you get to feel good about that. Which is something we didn't talk about last time, because we had established that you were going to make this a mini habit of, just 3 minutes as a daily minimum. And rather than the let's go overboard and do like 20 minutes. What I didn't mention was you're allowed to do more if you happen to feel like doing more. And you get to celebrate that and treat that as, oh, I did bonus reps today. I went overboard, went above and beyond, and it's awesome. But don't raise the bar. If you have a day like that where you're like, oh, I'm going to do another 3 minutes, and you're feeling really motivated to do it that day, a lot of people mistakenly think, oh, that's a sign that I'm ready to just double my time limit for every single day. When in fact, it was probably just a single day of feeling extra motivated to do it, or you were enjoying it, so you wanted to do it more. So in the beginning, I treat that as bonus reps and not raise the standard.
It's a really interesting question, something I wanted to mention, because there's never been a day where I did as little as 3 minutes, just because of the way I was doing that. I was using the Headspace app, and I've been working through their introductory Basics 1 meditation mindfulness introduction course, which is 10 days. So I just finished that yesterday. I did day 10 yesterday. And the minimum time you can set those to is 4.5 minutes. You can set them for a bit longer, and you get the same voiceover, but they give you a little bit more space in between and make it a slightly longer practice. So I went for the minimum, which was 4.5 minutes. I think actually the amount of kind of meditation time within that is probably actually closer to 3 minutes, but they'll give you a little preamble to warm you up and give you a little reflection time. How did the practice feel at the end? So maybe the actual core meditation is probably closer to 3 minutes anyway. But the kind of exercise as a whole was more like 4.5. And I was finding the time just flew by. It didn't feel like 4.5 minutes at all. It felt like I'd sit down, like in a minute or two later, it was done. It's strange. It went really, really fast. Interestingly, so having done the 10 days of Basics 1, the next course is Basics 2. There's Basics 1, Basics 2, and Basics 3. Basics 2 follows on from Basics 1 and gets a little bit more advanced. And that is quite a sharp step up in terms of the minimum time that they'll run the exercises for. It's now more like 10 minutes. So the first day of Basics 2 today, and that was a 10-minute exercise. Now, again, the time flew by. It could have been 4, 5, 6 minutes. My plan at the moment, and tell me what you think, is to try that for a few days. Not least because it feels like there's a nice sense of continuity, and they've put some time and thought into kind of laying out this nice progression, this nice journey. I'm quite attracted to the idea of trying to go with that, even though it is a much sharper jump up than might be sort of best practice from a pure behavior change perspective. If it doesn't work, then maybe revisiting and coming up with a plan B, which could be looking at some of their kind of standalone exercises, which are much shorter, and sort of doing those for a few weeks, and then maybe sort of building up towards being able to kind of take Basics 2. But I'm thinking if I can kind of handle that jump up to 10 minutes, then no reason to kind of limit it, I guess. What would your thoughts be?
It's of course possible to do that. Someone could go from not meditating at all to doing an hour a day. There's no like laws of the universe says you can't do that. It's just the likelihood of skipping days, I think, goes up dramatically. So you just got to ask yourself, can I imagine a weekday morning when the idea of doing a 10-minute meditation would create a bunch of resistance for me? And I'd be like, I don't have time. Screw it. I'm not doing it today. And if you can imagine that day happening, you got to have a fallback plan, which could be, oh, I just sit down and do 3 minutes on my own. And as you mentioned, the beginner course that you were taking allows you to expand the time a little bit. So you could just repeat the beginner course without expanding the time. And that would keep you at the same low level. And spaced repetition helps with learning. So it's not a bad thing to revisit those things, whatever ideas they were presenting. And if you were feeling ready to expand the time, you could nudge it up a little bit. That's
a really good idea. I don't know why I didn't think of that. That's a really obvious thing to do. That's exactly what I should do. Yeah, I'll go back and do the first 10 days. I'll repeat that for a second time. I think that makes a ton of sense, because there were absolutely days where I was perhaps slightly more mind-wandery, and some of the words, some of the guidance, I probably wasn't able to take that in. And so I think there's definitely more meat to scrape off the bone by going through it a second time. And as you say, that allows a slightly smoother glide path. That's a great shout. That's exactly what I'll do.
And in the world of habit building, there's all kinds of numbers people throw out about how long it takes to establish a habit, from like 20 days to 90 days. And it's really completely variable depending on the habit and the person and all the other things you're doing to make it stick. But I think the lowest number I've ever heard is 21 days to actually establish a habit. So I would be very hesitant to advise you to expand that habit into something bigger than your minimum dose that you're doing before you've achieved, at least 20 days.
Yeah, that makes sense. It might not be quite at the kind of indelible stage yet, but it's certainly at the point where it feels like it's part of what I would expect as part of the morning routine, rather than something I'm trying to, so this kind of new alien weird thing I'm trying to do. But yeah, no, it's overall going really well.
And that makes sense because we have been strategically like setting you up so that it accelerates the habit formation, because you've got a consistent time and space that you do it in, and you're tracking it and kind of giving yourself that pat on the back when you do it. And you've got a very consistent method you're using to engage the habit. All those things make it stick.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, my own reflections, just to kind of echo that, really. It's not necessarily the identical time on the clock, but it's the same point in the morning routine. So it's once I've got up, had a bit of a read, often had a little bit of coffee, and then I'll go into meditating before starting work in earnest for the day. So that's a really good thing. The habit tracking, having it very visual on the wall, I can see it. It's very clear. That's really helpful and motivating. That's working really nicely. And sort of some of the elements of ritualizing it a bit. So having the chair, like you suggested. One thing I kind of added, which we didn't really talk about, but it's a little cherry on the cake, perhaps. I pull the chair out the night before and put my earbuds on the chair ready to go, so that in the morning, there's no sort of scrabbling around. Like, the chair's there ready to go. I don't need to find where I've left my earplugs the night before. It's all ready to go. It's makes it very easy, and it's also very clear what my intentions from yesterday's self to this morning's self were in terms of how I'd start the day.
Yeah. That taps into one of my favorite strategies, which is called the 20-second rule. If you make something 20 seconds easier to do, you're dramatically more likely to do it. Well, keep up the good work and let it grow slowly and organically.
Absolutely. And, thank you again for your input. It's honestly been really, really helpful for me. The combination of the kind of the practical strategies plus, just having the kind of accountability to yourself and, to me, makes the commitment very clear. And it's been, so far so good. But yeah, no, for now, thanks ever so much, Chris. Been really, really great. And thanks again, Chris. Now, that last part of the conversation you just heard was recorded now, good 4 or 5 months ago versus when I'm talking to you now. And I'm pleased to report that another 4 or 5 months on, the meditation habit is still with me. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't been perfect. It was quite a struggle for a few months, as my wife and I just had a baby girl, who's been an utter delight and brought much joy to our home, but also made good lifestyle habits a little bit tough to stick to for a spell. But as we all start to get back into new household routines, I was pleasantly surprised to find that the meditation habit came back relatively quickly. And I think that's all thanks to the kind of solid work to lay those foundations of the habit earlier in the year. And there've been some really lovely moments too, like when I was travelling to deliver some study skills seminars for a school in Devon, England, the first ones I'd done for a while. And I had to be up super early and was in a fairly unfamiliar setting where I'd been staying overnight, had a really big day of speaking ahead, been travelling all day yesterday. And it was really nice. I got up and I executed on my normal morning routine, as exactly we were talking about with Chris earlier in this conversation. And in particular, there's just such this wonderful sense of peace that came from doing my normal routine and centering that around this kind of 10-minute meditation in my hotel room. It was really great and brought just such a sort of sense of grounding in a slightly unfamiliar setting. And remember, habit change is about so much more than meditation. We've been using meditation as an example in this conversation, but really as a student, there are a whole host of habits you might be looking to work on. You might be looking to build up a more consistent study routine, start to get the hours in, or get into better habits around effective study strategies. We were talking about last season on the podcast with the How to Study Effectively series. Or maybe you want to work on your habits for optimum focus and concentration, like dealing with tech distractions, or getting into better habits for sleep or exercise, or really just any kind of habit in your life that might feed towards being more successful and productive. So remember, for all your habit change needs, Chris Loper is available to help support and guide you as your coach. You can find out more about that service at becomingbetter.org/coaching. And as I mentioned last week, Exam Study Expert podcast listeners get a special gift if you do go on to work with Chris and get his support as your habit change coach. So if you let him know that you're a listener of this podcast, he will fix you up when you become a client of his with complimentary access to my brand new mini workshop on my own study habits as a student. Video lesson in 3 chapters in which I run you through my habits for my study routine, my study technique, and my exam week habits, all of which contributed to me getting through Cambridge University with a first-class degree. And again, all you need to know about next steps for working with Chris, if that's something you want to pursue, you can find at becomingbetter.org/coaching. Thanks for listening today. It's been a real pleasure to have your company. Wishing you great habits this year and every success, as always, in your studies.